I am not your host and your MC today. It's actually somebody that we just brought in, Kate Colvin. She is a graduate of University of Idaho of 2007 and 2010, and also a graduate, not of the university, but with her PhD. What school was that, Kate? I'm sorry.
Texas Tech.
Okay, that's okay. We'll let you go on that one. But
Yeah.
your other two degrees are from the University of Idaho, and Texas Tech's a great school too. Kate was adopted into a military family at the age of 7, and she really passionately from her heart wanted to give back and gives back to our veterans into military activities and operations and needs all the time, which really was of great interest when we hired Kate into this position. She spent a decade on performance psychology as a performance psychologist for special operations, and she focused on performance enhancement, as well as the psychology of and neurological consequences of many of our military. And she served as the lead tactical psychologist for NATO in special operations, and which that time she also was very much partnered in building other programs that help our veterans and our military operations. So Kate, we're just so lucky to have you on board, and I want to now turn it over to you so you can introduce our guest and kind of lead the rest of the discussion for today. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I am incredibly happy to be back at my alma mater and in this position. Quite frankly, I knew I wanted to work for the Alumni Association, gosh, since I was in SARB during my undergrad. So I'm thrilled to be back. I'm even more thrilled to have my friend and our guest today, Mack, here to chat with us about his experience within the military. When I first came on, and Sandy and I were dividing up the chapters, it almost seemed like a no-brainer that I would take the veterans affinity group based on my experience. And so when we were chatting about who might be someone that would be good to be on this Cup of Joe during this awesome week, Mack came to mind. I've known Mack since my master's degree. He's done a lot of work on the Palouse as a U of I grad, and I just am thrilled to be able to offer him the opportunity to share what he's doing on the Palouse, and then as a representative nationwide of Idaho. So I'm just thrilled to have him today. So as I said, Mack is from Moscow. He's a Moscow native. He is a graduate of the business college in 2005. Prior to that, he spent 6 years in the Marines, took a quick break and decided he wasn't done. And so he went back for more and served with his squad. After that, he came back, wrapped up his degree in the business school, and then got involved in created Marines of the Palouse. And I'll let him share that with you. And then became the Idaho representative for the Veteran Sportsman Alliance. And I'll let him talk more about that as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Mack. Before I do so, I will say any questions that you have, we're going to save those for the end. But if you can go ahead and just put those in a direct private message to Sandy in the chat, she'll tally all the questions and then ask those for us at the end. And then if you guys can all just make sure that you are muted, that would be awesome as well. So with that being said, I am going to mute myself, and Mack, just take it over. Tell us about yourself, please.
Well, hello, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I will say, the first thing is I did not create Marines of the Palouse by myself. It was a group effort. Ted Owens and Matt Deckard, Brady Anderson. We're all individually from Moscow. We grew up more or less at the same time. And so got to give those guys a shout out for sure. So yeah, growing up here in Moscow, I love it here. I've been a lot of different places, and I couldn't ever imagine not coming back here. Of course, university is a big part of it, but I'm an outdoor person, so running whitewater, hunting, fishing, it's kind of a great spot for all of that. And that kind of led me into certainly Marines of the Palouse, but then Veteran Sportsman Alliance with all those things. That's kind of how I got connected with them. So I guess that's short and sweet, kind of who I am.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you enlist in the Marines?
Well, I kind of felt like I was always going to be a Marine. Not that I ever really thought about it. Maybe it was just in the back of my mind. And then after my first semester at UI, I wasn't being a great student, didn't have any real direction. And sometimes I made very big knee-jerk type decisions. And I said, well, I'm just going to go do this now. So that was it. It's my dad was prior enlisted Marine. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. But then, why I chose a Marine Corps, certainly my dad, but, if you're going to do something hard, might as well make it the hardest.
I mean, I don't know if I would, no, just joking, but coming to I'm like, I don't know if that's the hardest, but so me coming from primarily an Army, dabbled a little bit with MARSOC and Navy, and we use the term MOS, but I guess, so what was your MOS, your occupational specialty? What did you focus on? Any additional schools or training? What was your job?
My MOS, I was a 0811 Field Artillery Cannoneer. And that was the only job that I wanted. I was qualified to do a number of different things, but once I kind of learned a little bit about that, then that was the only thing I wanted to do.
What was it about it in particular?
Just giant explosions, I think, probably. The king of battle, I used to, back in the day, say it's like a ballet of terror. So there's so many moving parts in order to fire a cannon, safely, efficiently, and everybody needs to be in the right place, and they need to be doing their job correctly. And if everybody's doing what they need to be doing, it's like a ballet. It's beautiful, in some weird, twisted way.
I've never heard ballet of terror. I wrote that down. That's fabulous. That's so fantastic. I mean, it's twisted, but it's awesome.
Yeah.
And so how many deployments did you have? Sorry.
We just had a message here that they're having a hard time hearing you, Max. So if you can speak up and make sure that mic is by your mouth, that's really great. Thank you. Okay.
Is that any better? I hope so.
I think so. Just making sure your voice doesn't fade, but if you can speak loudly and in the mic, that's really great. Thank you.
Okay.
So how soon from going through all of your initial schooling did you deploy? What was that experience like? What years did you deploy? Was this after 9/11?
Yeah, so I joined March 3rd, 1997, but I did not deploy until 2004. So it was a big, long stint. And you mentioned before that I'd gotten out and then got back in. Well, my old unit was deploying. I was still in the inactive ready reserve, meaning I was still technically under contract, even though I was out. So I had an opportunity to go back in, extend that contract, so I could deploy, with my group, with my guys. And it's kind of a funny story behind that. I climbed Mount Rainier the year before with a couple of guys, 2 platoon sergeants, one of them being mine. And I told them that I never wanted to do that again. The snow was very soft. I did not have the best gear, and certainly I'm not a mountaineer. But we went and did it, and it was great. It was terrible, but it was great. And we were planning, in the stages of planning of doing it again, even though I told them I would never do it again. And I got a phone call from my old platoon sergeant, and he said, hey, planning this, planning that, you got this, you got that. And then towards at the end of the conversation, he said, hey, if we were ever going to deploy, would you come back and go with us? I thought that was a really loaded question. And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. And a week later, he called me and said, hey, we're going to deploy. Do you want to go with us? And I said, okay. Knee jerk again. But, if you go through all of that, all that training, all those years, and then you see your unit deploying, well, gotta go do it.
I'm surprised y'all didn't deploy sooner, honestly. and the kind of in that pipeline. But yeah, that makes
Well,
sense when you went back.
when we deployed, we didn't deploy as artillery. We were something
Mm.
else. So they didn't need artillery at the time. I actually spoke to my old CO when I was in Iraq, and he was super excited. It bummed me out because he actually got to do artillery missions, and here I am, vehicle, we'll say mechanized infantry, more or less. Not the job that I wanted to be doing, but certainly a great experience.
Yeah. Was the deployment, was that the job you wanted to do or no?
No, I would have, if I had a choice, I would go fire artillery.
Yeah.
That's what I loved, but it wasn't.
Oh, gotcha. So you didn't do, okay. That makes sense.
Yep. So we did a different job.
I love that you mentioned so that as soon as you got done summiting Rainier, you were already planning your next summit, right? Or the next mountain.
Yeah.
So for my dissertation, I focused on the sense of mastery and how when we engage in different things and we achieve those things, accomplish them, how it really does kind of bleed over into other areas. And I know you've always been a high achiever. Do you notice that like those achievements, or they fuel kind of the next thing for you?
I never really thought about it that way. I think oftentimes things that I do, will say if there is an achievement, I just move on. Like, okay, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
We could do something else. Like Whitewater Guiding, I did that for a couple summers. And for a lot of people, that's like a huge achievement to be able to, run down class 3, class 4 whitewater. But, after that, I was done with it. I still go rafting, but I don't want to guide anymore.
Yeah.
Move on to something else.
Yeah. Next achievement.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your deployment. What was the deployment prep like? What was the deployment itself like? Kind of just tell us about the highs, the lows. What was your experience like?
The prep, well, again, we were an artillery unit, so we went down to Twin Palms and we prepped to be infantry. So we spent a month down there learning close quarters combat, patrolling techniques, certainly different styles of communication, even though we have been taught these things in schools years before actually implementing them. And, just building team unity and trying to understand what the mission might be. We didn't fully know what the mission would be until we deployed. But so that was, that's a little bit on the prep. We deployed.
And how long were you back with your team before you guys began the deployment prep and training?
Week.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. I don't really remember. No, I think it was longer than that. It was probably 3 weeks.
And you already knew everybody prior to come,
Yep.
like the individuals you're working with, it was still your team.
Yeah, nothing much had changed. I mean, I didn't go right
Awesome.
back into the full leadership position. My job when I left the first time, I was an artillery chief. But then they changed everything up, and now we know that we're not going to be firing artillery, so now we're in squads. And since I had left, they'd moved things around, so I wasn't a squad leader when I first showed up. A couple weeks into it, I was back into that leadership position.
Got it. Okay. So it got team back up.
Say that again.
I said, so you just got team back up with your previous guys and then you deploy?
Mostly with artillery guys. We had a little bit of mix. We had communications guys, we had motor T. They mixed it up pretty well, I think. I think our leadership did a pretty good job of evening out what we would say strengths and weaknesses, and make sure we have motor T guys and comm guys and artillery guys that different specialties. So if anything came up, maybe you can lean on somebody else when it's not your specialty. So
Yeah.
we did a really good job of that.
What was the deployment experience like? Were y'all busy? Not? What was it like in 2004?
Pretty slow. I mean, we were in Al Assad, which is air base in Iraq, just outside the town of Baghdad, between Hadith and Ramadi, and it's the biggest, well, I believe it was the biggest AO in all of Iraq, area of operation. And it's just flat desert. So wasn't a whole lot going on. Every now and then there'd be something kind of exciting. We'd have rocket attacks, which I found out towards the end of the deployment every day. They just weren't accurate attacks. Not very often did they get close to the wire, a few times inside the wire, but pretty slow for the most part. And certainly hot. And then it got cold. And that was, we had a couple of exciting moments. Well, I don't know if exciting is the right term, but excitement for sure. But other than that, pretty slow.
What was the most memorable experience from your deployment?
I would say there's probably two that for different reasons are memorable. We had a vehicle-borne IED or a suicide bomb that was detonated at our front gate, and the gate was not open yet. Vehicles could come in from outside the gate. We had Iraqi nationals that worked in the base, did various different jobs. Trucks coming in with supplies from outside the wire. And on this particular day, so we also trained Iraqi police cadets inside. That was not a part of my job, but and I heard afterwards how this all went down. But the Iraqi police cadets were dropped off sooner than they should have been. The gate was not open, and that's when that vehicle-borne IED was detonated. And we had just done changeover, so that is our job to respond to that, the quick reaction force. And I was just getting ready to rack out and go to sleep, and that happened. So we gathered up our guys and ran up there and responded to it. Our QRF was already there, but we were what I would say a tertiary response. And eventually after sitting and waiting, we're just trying to suss out what exactly had happened and then what the response is going to be afterwards. Eventually we punch out outside of the front gate, and we're just stopping traffic until they can kind of sort out what's going on. And that happened. It took, I don't know how many hours, but it was a very long time. And the Iraqi police came back, and they were doing, and I don't want to get too in detail with this, but they were collecting their own, we'll say. But they were having a hard time doing it because it was hard to kind of figure out what was what. I mean, it was a massive explosion. And, that's a significant event. But when they were collecting their own, there were a couple of them that were having a real hard time with it for obvious reasons. But it was very humanizing just to see somebody that doesn't look like you. They're wearing a different uniform than you are. You're like, well, they're probably buddies. They could be brothers, cousins, neighbors, whatever it is. So that'll stick with you for a while. And then the second event actually was a really cool event. And that was when the Iraqis got the chance to vote. And that was a very tense time because it's the first time this had ever happened. Very high security. And one of the buses came back from the polling station, and Iraqis were waving flags, singing and dancing. And, that was pretty cool thing to see. So kind of on the other spectrum of, things that stick with you.
Yeah. I guess with the first event, we talk a lot about, resilience is a huge buzzword, that's been all over, especially I would say the military, which is the idea of bouncing back. But what I really see is that idea of a post-traumatic growth, right? So when we are encountered or we're faced with a situation that does involve adversity to that extent, I mean, we have one way or another to go. What do you think it was that helped prepare you to be able to, I don't want to say thrive, but to be present in that moment, in that situation, and to just do your job? And then I guess, what did the coping of that look like afterwards, or the healing, I guess, of that?
Well, I don't think that anybody's prepared to take that vision into your head. The human brain is not meant to, we'll say, deal with that type of thing, in my opinion. So I don't know that I was prepared for that. But as far as coping with it goes, certainly there was some issues sleeping. For a while, a recurring dream. Actually, I'll tell you the dream is that I think most people can probably relate. So the dream was that I was there and I knew that this was going to happen. And I knew that there was no place for them to go. And the only thing that I could tell them or yell at them was to get down. But it's like one of those dreams where you're running from something. Like we'll say a lion is chasing you, but you can't run.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get away. Well, the words won't come out.
Yeah.
And so, after some point I realized, well, it's a dream. It's not actual, it's not real.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely nothing I could do about it. So, I don't really have that dream anymore. Every now and then I will, but I don't wake up from it. Typically, I just realize somehow in my little pea brain that it's not real. So, but dealing with coming back and transitioning and trying to understand. I mean, I went from one extreme to another.
Yeah, absolutely.
I went from the Marine Corps straight to Riggins, and I mean straight, drove straight, and
Like went straight to the river.
Went straight to the river. And
Yeah.
That was different because I'm used to things being
Chaotic.
rigid schedules, and this is how this is supposed to be done, and you need to be doing this, and I need to be doing this, to where it's so much more laid back. And it took me a few weeks to understand that, well, this is a different job.
Yeah. Was that frustrating, or was it like an easy transition, or like?
Oh man, it drove me nuts for the first couple of weeks. Just like, people not pulling their own weight or not doing the things that they could be doing. But I think it was probably a pretty good transition because, living on a river, just hanging out on beaches, and, hanging out with your friends.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good time.
Yeah. Was there a point? So, I mean, coming back, just being a river guide, hanging out with your homies on the beach, that's lovely, right? And also it does serve as a distraction. And what I found is a lot of veterans, when they do get out, it's very easy to continue to keep themselves distracted than be present, right? So we know that a lot of the times neurologically, the reason why we have nightmares is because we haven't really processed, these events that have happened. So with the let's say the event one, and I'm sure that there were other events as well that you experienced similarly to that throughout. We talked about the idea of resilience or post-traumatic growth. Was there a time when things got difficult for you after you got out? And did any of that like resilience that you had built up while serving, did any of that translate to those maybe more difficult experiences since you left your service?
Well, I would say maybe adaptability. I took a job, well, I guess it was about a year after finishing UY. I was working in a job, I hated it, and I took a different job in Panama, the country, not the town. And when I showed up, and again, knee-jerk, life-changing ideas and decisions. I was looking for a job. I said, hey, we'll hire you down here. And a week later, all my stuff was packed and put away, and I had a couple bags, and I didn't know the currency. I didn't know what side of the street they drove on. I didn't know the crime rates. I didn't know anything about Panama.
Yeah.
But I had a buddy down there, and it took a few weeks and just figured it out. So certainly adaptability, and I don't know about resilience in that. I lived there for 2 years, and it was a good overall experience. But for me, an Idaho guy living in Central America in a city, fun place to visit for me, but I would never go back and live there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if resilience works into that. But we started a company when I was down there. I left the job that I was in and started a company with 2 other guys doing the same thing. And that was in, we'll say, June 2008. And if anybody's familiar with what happened in 2008, it's not a good time to be in a finance company or selling financials. And that's what we were doing. And, the market crashed hard. And I realized it wasn't really going to work out. I tried to keep the company going on my own and I moved back to Moscow, and I was still doing the job, but I was working terrible hours and not making a lot of money. And so I don't know, maybe you can relate resilience to that.
Oh, absolutely.
I was pushing to get it done. And then just at some point, you realize, well, it's time to pull the plug and move on, because it's something that we created and I wanted to keep doing it. But
yeah. Well, it's almost like the crash of the market was that explosion right at the gate. So
it could be.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're navigating a new, set of circumstances differently, but you're still navigating nevertheless.
Yeah, one way or another. I mean, I'll move on to the next task. If it's not working out, go find some different way to do it, or come to the realization that maybe it's just not going to get done.
Yeah. What was your transition? I'm very curious what your transition was like to college after having been in the military. Because obviously there's going to be an age gap. I mean, was there any frustration there, or?
No, I already knew everything that I needed to get done to finish. The age gap was a little bit there. I'm trying to finish up, and I'm 28 years old, and everybody else is 21, 22. And, I look at an age gap right now, we'll say 6 years, and that doesn't mean much, but it means quite a bit when you're 28 and they're 22.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very fortunate to have pretty good teammates at the CE, pretty smart folks, and I just aligned pretty well with them. And I'm sure they still do it the same way. The College of Business and Economics, you have teams, and you find strengths and weaknesses, and who's got more time and who doesn't, and that's how you allot all the work and put out a good product. So
yeah. I've encountered a lot of veterans that hesitate going back to school because of like the age, or I hear a lot like, I forgot how to learn. So yeah. I guess what would you tell somebody who may be a little bit older that has served with that transition? I mean, what advice might you give them?
Well, I speak in literal, so I would say, yeah, you are different. So realize that you're not going to be the same as they are. But you need to understand that, you still have to do the same work.
Yeah.
And your brain's going to work differently than theirs does. You have to be accepting of the way that they're going to do things. They may not be so accepting. If you were rigid, like I used to be, that may not work, So the adaptability to it, and understand, maybe you are older, maybe you have more experience in the real world, or you have more maturity, whatever it may be. But just realize that you are different. So embrace the new situation and roll with it.
Yeah, identifying the strengths that you can bring to the table.
Yep.
So So with that, I mean, there's maybe a lack of a sense of relatedness because of, these differences life-wise. And you and I have spoke a lot about, developing Marines of the Palouse and seeing a need for that. And I know, creating and cultivating an opportunity for people to experience a sense of relatedness was important to you. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about how Marines of the Palouse started, and then some of the work that you've done in the community since then?
Yeah. The Marines of the Palouse, we started that organization because there was no official Marine Corps birthday celebration. It was very casual. There were some ROTC, NESEP folks, but it wasn't, an abbreviated ceremony. And we're like, well, let's do the real thing. Let's put on a real celebration. And Teddy, of course, who he's always coming up with ideas. He came up with the idea of raising money and donating it to the Wounded Warriors. Wounded Warrior Foundation, I think.
Wounded Warrior Project.
Project, yeah. And so that kind of morphed into a very big project because we're trying to put on Marine Corps birthday celebration and create a fundraiser at the same time. And that was a lot of moving parts, and it wasn't beautiful the first time. It was a little rough, but we raised like $40,000, in that one event, and we had a pretty good celebration. And we actually only paid, and it's still weird for me to say this, we paid Wounded Warriors the $500 fee for using their logo. And then we took the rest of the $40,000 and started coming up with ideas of what we can do with it, around Moscow or the Palouse. And we started running into, or I shouldn't say running into, but finding Purple Heart recipients that maybe need some help financially, or they need some work done on their homes. We started doing fundraising year after year, doing through golf tournaments and through the celebration dinner and auction. And
you're being very, very humble right now. So I just want to pause. $40,000 was raised to go towards Wounded Warriors, and you all chose to give that back to people on the Palouse. And I mean, can you just let everybody know how your group literally went and built a new house in Pullman for somebody? That's incredible. It's not just talk about what you're doing, Mack.
Yeah, I don't know. So this Army veteran, Richard, I believe he was an Army medic. He was blown up, I believe in Afghanistan, and he was paralyzed. And he actually recovered. So it was a temporary paralysis, and he recovered. And when he was discharged, he came back to Pullman and got on with fire service in Pullman, I believe the rural fire department. And he was coming home from a training, I believe Seattle or Spokane maybe, and he was in a car wreck, and then he was paralyzed for real, quadriplegic. And Home Depot got involved with the project, Superior Floors, Complete Carpentry, Polar Construction, McCoy Plumbing, and we just got together and said, hey, we're gonna fix this guy's house so it's ADA and he can get around in his wheelchair. So yeah, floor leveling and getting rid of carpet, putting down vinyl tiles. Marines of the Palouse bought a wheelchair elevator so he could get up to the second story bedroom, and we leveled out the shower so he had a roll-in shower, and the house was fully functional for him.
It's incredible.
Which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, so you learned, no, I don't want to say learned you had this passion for helping wounded warriors at that time, but you said that kind of really was when you're like, I love this and I want to continue to give back. And so can you talk about how you got involved in the National Sportsman Alliance and then what that program does to give back to wounded warriors? I think it's just an awesome program.
Yeah, the Veteran Sportsman Alliance. They're originally out of California. You know, there's, I believe, 5 state chapters, maybe 6, Tennessee, Oregon, Idaho. Yeah, I think there's about 5. Actually, a buddy of mine, Will Howard, who you might know, he went to school with Jesse Buster. They graduated at the same time out of art and architecture. He started Stack Rock Group down in Boise, landscape architecture, and he reached out to me one day, just kind of out of the blue, and said, "Hey, do you have any Purple Heart guys that want to go on an elk hunt?" And I said, "Well, how many tags do you have?" He said, "Well, I've only got one," and that's when Cody Ensley and I, who you know, drove down to Boise, and yeah, we got on a landowner cow hunt, and it didn't work out that year. The elk, when we got down there, the elk weren't there yet, but they did fill a tag. A Marine veteran filled the tag on the last day of the season, and
Nice.
But it was a great time. And you know, those guys, Will's not a veteran. He's the vice president of the organization for the Idaho chapter, and Michael Moore, who's the president, he's a veteran. But for the most part, volunteers are about 50-50, veterans and non-veterans. And since then, we've done a number of cow hunts. We went to Texas last spring and did a pig hunt. There will be steelhead fishing up here as soon as I get off my duff and book the trip. We'll do some spring fly fishing here locally with White Pine Outfitters, Tyler Nash, and yeah, and hopefully some more fly fishing down south. And yeah, it's pretty cool to be with these guys that have a passion for the outdoors. They want to be out doing stuff, but then they realize, hey, you know, let's get these guys on some hunts. And you know, when we're going on a cow hunt again this year, I'm going to go down with 2 Vandals, 2 Purple Heart recipients. Mike Wells, he's also a Bronze Star recipient, just got that in the last year. And he's a lawyer in town. He does veterans advocacy. He helped me out navigating the VA, which is great, because it's a terrible thing to have to do on your own. And Josh Stedman, he's a double Purple Heart recipient. I think he was fisheries. Let's say he graduated, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. You know, and both these guys are good buddies of mine. And we're going to go down and hopefully get those guys fill a couple cow tags.
That's awesome.
December.
I love that and Amy, thank you for dropping the link in. Everybody make sure to check the message feed. The Veteran Sportsman Alliance link is there. I love that this is an opportunity for people to come back together and get involved. So my father's a veteran and they coordinate a big fishing trip every year. And it just is an opportunity for them to get together, reminisce or not. And when you're just around other people that have the same shared lived experiences as you, it really is an opportunity to continue to promote healing and growth in that sense. So I just think it's incredible that you're doing that on the Palouse, but then also going to, you know, continue this with the Sportsman Alliance. I just think it's fabulous. If people want to get involved in either or, how would they do that?
Well, right now I would say, Marines of the Palouse, I'll say we're on a hiatus. It was becoming, because it's 100% volunteer, we were getting burnt out pretty hard. We still have the 501c3, but we haven't accepted any donations. We haven't done any fundraising for about 3 years now. My focus has shifted to Veteran Sportsman Alliance. And, you know, being the North Idaho representative, trying to look out for Purple Hearts up here in North Idaho. And so if you want to be involved with that, you can log on to Veteran Sportsman Alliance and select Idaho chapter. And there is a donate button, but it just takes you to the contact. We do not, currently right now, we are not set up for online donations. Will is working on that diligently. and I appreciate everything that he does. But you can send an email to I think it's M Moore, it's Michael Moore at Veteran Sportsman Alliance, or Will Howard is W Howard at veteransportsmanalliance.org. Yeah, org. And yeah, just reach out to those guys. They want to hear. And if you know of any Purple Hearts that want to go, and I mean, even if it's just getting outside, going for a walk in the park,
Yeah.
we'll find somebody. And but certainly, if you want to volunteer, or a big one is finding places to go do stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're an outfitter and you want to donate some time, or if you're a landowner and you have land that can be hunted or fished on, please reach out to us. And certainly reach out to either one of those guys, and because I know there's a way to donate right now. It's just it's not online. So, or it's not on the website. So yeah, please. And reach out to them. Any ideas that you have, if you have different ideas that we could be doing or should be doing, reach out to us. We're always looking for new opportunities.
I think that's great. And then Mack, you recently joined our Veterans Affinity Group, so the Vandal Vets chapter. And so for those of you who are on as well, we do have a new affinity group, and it is our Vandal Veteran alumni. And so shoot me an email if you want to get on the email list for that, and I will be putting out information for different opportunities that we can all be a part of to get engaged together. And then in addition, there is a Facebook page. If any of you do have Facebook, it's just Idaho alumni and then veteran, and then you can join that page as well. And so we'll post anything veteran specific in there. So I do want to go to the questions really quick, Mack. It looks like we have definitely one. Amy, thank you. And so Amy would like to know, and anybody else, if you have questions specifically for Mack, they can be specific, broad. Please go ahead and drop those in the chat to Sandy, and she'll get them my way. So did you, and I know that you were a squad leader, so what did your mentorship look like for, the younger Marines? And I've noticed kind of that you've always gravitated towards those leadership positions. So what insights would you share with folks on this call that might also be interested in, those leadership or mentorship positions? What skills do you think would be helpful?
Well, for me, and this is specific to me, but I think it probably applies to everybody, no matter what the situation is, but find patience. You have to be patient. And, if you're mentoring, there's going to be mistakes. And I found that, well, I was always a little more, we'll say, vocal as a leader. And there are a few instances where that didn't work out well at all. So you have to understand the individual, you have to understand their personalities, and you have to adapt yourself to those personalities. And to make sure that they are getting the information that you're trying to pass in a way that they can accept it. Just hollering at somebody that should know how to do their job, but isn't doing it correctly. It might work for some, but it might not work for others. And this is in a military setting, of course. In a Marine Corps setting, you're not going to holler at somebody in a professional setting. That's not going to go well for you. But
Yes.
It still resonates that you have to understand who the individual is, and find a good way of communicating.
And then
Go
sorry. I was just going to say, and then the second part for that one, the follow-up was, so this would even be like, I know you two little girls, but Amy just was curious how you've applied those skills now. So I guess, and I would call that emotional intelligence is really what we're looking at there, right? That idea of, and I know that you say that a lot of your decisions are knee-jerk, but I would probably beg to differ that you probably put a little bit more thought into some of those things, especially being able to take that step back, reflect on maybe an engagement or a situation, and know how to adjust fire and kind of re-engage with that individual. So have you noticed that those skills have transitioned well to your life now, and in what particular instances?
I still don't know that I'm a great communicator. I struggle with it, certainly. If you want to talk about my two little girls, oftentimes It's just like, why did you do that? Type of thing. But when you're talking to a 4-year-old, that doesn't really work out that well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess, can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
I was just wondering how maybe that, like how that, the sense of emotional intelligence or the skills that you gained from, your leadership responsibilities, how has that transitioned in not just to like Marines of the Palouse, but I would say even to like interpersonal relationships, how you notice that that's really allowed you to thrive in developing and being a part of organizations and that kind of stuff.
Well, I have learned, well, I should say that I should have learned, I'm learning that to step back and take a look at a situation rather than just, make a knee-jerk decision.
So, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, step back if you can, step back and step away and assess what's going on around you. And I think that applies to everything.
Yeah.
If something's going a little sideways, whatever the situation is, jumping in the middle of it may not be the best solution. But if you are, we'll say, in a leadership position, you need to understand what the problem is before you can solve it. So yeah, and I'm not good at this. I tend to jump right in, but to try and step back and understand what the problem is and come up with a solution. And
Yeah.
it's not easy for me. I see a problem, I'm gonna go solve it.
Yeah. It's interesting because like, I know it's so cheesy, but our greatest strengths do tend to be our greatest weaknesses and vice versa, right? So
Yeah.
your ability to jump in head first. I mean, we need people that are willing to just do without thinking, I guess, in some of those instances, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we need you to do the opposite in other instances. So it's very curious how in life we have to learn to really rein in our strengths at some points, right? And those can be so pervasive in what we do. So what would be one piece of advice that you would give students, I would say, who are looking at volunteering or getting engaged with veterans? Where would they even start?
Well, I would say they should start with you. You seem to be a pretty good resource for that. But you can reach out to fraternal organizations are always a great thing for that. So the American Legion here in town, the FW here in town, they're always having events, and those are veteran-run organizations.
Yeah.
And certainly, reach out to U of I if they need help with something. You're going to plan an event. I'm sure that you could use some help for or help with. But also, just go do it.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about it, then that means that you should probably just go do it. When it comes to volunteering, there aren't nearly enough volunteers out there. And when it comes to volunteerism, when you are one of those volunteers, oftentimes you end up doing a lot of work. When if you just had 2 more people, it wouldn't be a lot of work and it would be fun. So just get involved, find a way.
It's interesting too, because the psychology behind like any kind of community service, philanthropy projects, like we know that helping others actually helps. It's clinically proven to help fight depression, anxiety, and a lot of negative mental health disorders. And then, the idea of relatedness, I would encourage anybody to get involved really in anything. So I love the idea where you're like, stop thinking about it, just do it. Yeah, I love it because it really does help you and it helps others. So before we wrap up, I just want, if it's okay with you, what's your favorite memory as a vandal? I put you on the spot. I didn't prep you for this one.
How about if it was as a quasi vandal? I was a ball boy.
Oh, really?
It's not a good memory. It's not a good memory at all.
Share it with us.
But it's I was a ball boy when I
said
was
favorite, not best. So
no,
or good.
it's a good memory, but it wasn't when it happened. So we'll say 13 years old, and it was either Montana or Montana State who we were playing, and it was goal line, Vandals are on defense, and I'm standing there with my footballs like a ball boy does. And it was like a really tense moment in the game. And I keep saying it was Eric Heisa. I believe it was Eric Heisa. He was a quarterback at the time. He came up behind me and punched the football out of my arm, and it flew out in the middle of the field.
No.
Yeah. And Eric, I'm sorry if it wasn't you, but you were on that team, so you know who did it. And the ball went flying out on the field, and the refs come out and whistles were blowing, and I had to run out there. To me, it appeared like I just took a football and threw it out on the field. And
That is memorable. That is
oh
memorable.
yeah, and I believe that, and I didn't know the game situation. I still don't know the game situation, but I'm guessing maybe U of I was short on timeouts and they wanted to stop the clock. And so
By the way, how great would it be if someone that was watching or listening in right now was at that game and saw that? When you were
somebody
13,
knows.
I would love it.
And somebody knows who did it too. I believe it's Eric Heisa, but I could have been telling this story wrong my entire life. I don't know.
I think that's hilarious. Well, Mac, thank you so much for your time. Before we kind of wrap up, Amy, I'm just going to hand it over to you if you have anything last minute that you wanted to add.
No, other than Matt, thank you for your story and thank you for your service and your continued service. I love the new organization that you've created and that you're involved in. It's so important, and we really, really appreciated your time today. And so thank you. And others on the phone, thank you for listening in and tuning in. And please know you're always welcome with your ideas for future Cup of Joes. And happy Veterans Week, and go Vandals. Thank you.
Go Vandals.
Vandals.
Bye, everybody.